I love being the proud owner of a home, but the flip side of that is it's a little scary knowing that I've got these resources that honestly could just go up in flames. So what do I do to protect myself and my investment? Well, of course, I try and avoid things on the front end that are likely to cause my house to catch on fire, and I have insurance policies to ensure that if necessary, I could rebuild, I could survive in the interim while that's happening. Starting with NSX 6.3, we have some additional technologies called CDO, Controller Disconnected Operation, and it's designed to give us resiliency, this idea of some insurance in case we lose access to the controllers. So in this nugget, we're going to delve into what this feature is, how it provides resiliency, and why we would want to turn it on. Now, before we dive into what CDO mode does, let's just talk for a moment about what kind of protection, what kind of resiliency we have just in the nature of our NSX control cluster itself. The NSX control cluster is designed to be able to load balance across the 3 nodes, and if one of those nodes should fail, the remaining nodes can support those VNIs. But what happens if we were to lose all of our nodes? Well, in that situation, we certainly shouldn't panic because the NSX controller is all about the central registration desk of control plane information. Once that information has gone out to the ESXi hosts, then the data plane communication can occur continually. Because all of the hosts will keep their own local copy of the VTEP and MAC and ARP tables, as long as that information is still accurate, then frames can be forwarded business as usual. Now, while all this is great, you may have noticed a fatal flaw, which CDO mode is going to help us address. What would happen if we were to power on a new virtual machine? Or what if we were to vMotion a virtual machine to another node? Let's take virtual machine B, and let's imagine that DRS says, we're running too many resources there on ESXi1. Let's vMotion this over to ESXi4. Only the problem is that it does so after all the nodes in the control cluster have gone down. And I know you might be thinking, wait a minute, I've got an HA cluster protecting all of these nodes. My control cluster is not going to go down like this. This is crazy talk. But you might also be dealing with WAN situations, and a disconnect from that WAN would be just as bad as if every one of your hosts managing the control cluster went down. So what's going to happen after this vMotion? Well, the vMotion will happen successfully. So virtual machine B is hosted on ESXi4. It's no longer hosted on ESXi1. Because of that, ESXi1 will remove an entry from the MAC table, right? It's no longer participating here. The ARP entry is still correct, the IP to MAC resolution that it's aware of, so that's fine. Should ESXi1 still be on the VTEP table? Yeah, it's still participating in VNI 5000 on behalf of virtual machine A, so that still makes sense. What about over on ESXi4? Well, now we'll need to add ESXi4 first to the VTEP table. Look, I have a virtual machine powered on, running on VNI 5000. Let me represent myself as an endpoint for VNI 5000, and let me specifically add virtual machine B's MAC address to the MAC address table referencing ESXi4's VTEP entry. VXLAN messages can be forwarded to ESXi4 when they need to reach virtual machine B. The problem is, these new changes can't be shared, because if our sharing is being done through unicasting with the controller and the controller's offline, we have no one to tell. Let's envision virtual machine A tries to communicate with virtual machine B. If A is pinging B, ESXi1 has the ARP entry, so it knows the IP address to MAC address. Then where do I forward the MAC address? Oh, I don't have that in my MAC table. What do we call that type of traffic? That would qualify as bum traffic. It's not a broadcast, it's not a multicast, but it is an unknown unicast address that we need to forward a frame to. This is when we use the VTEP table to say, okay, I need to forward this out to every participating member of VNI 5000 to try and communicate with the MAC address of virtual machine B. So ESXi1 knows that the other members that are on that VTEP table are ESXi2 and ESXi3. So it'll forward that frame to those devices. Will it get to virtual machine B then? No, because virtual machine B is on ESXi4, which none of the other hosts know is participating in VNI 5000. And we're going to have that exact same situation if we were just to boot a brand new machine. If we booted up virtual machine Q on ESXi4, wouldn't the same thing happen? No one would know that it existed. No one would even know ESXi4 was a part of that particular switch. So that's why we have CDO mode, Controller Disconnected Operations. CDO is actually talking about control plane success even when the controller is offline. First, while the control cluster is still running, we need to enable CDO mode. And this is actually done in 6.3 at the transport zone level. and in 6.4 at the manager level. When we enable CDO mode, it creates a new logical switch. It'll grab the next available VNI, so in this case it would be 5002, and it makes it a special CDO logical switch. Everyone in the transport zone in 6.3 or connected to the manager in 6.4 will be associated with this new switch. All it's going to hold is a global VTEP list. And during normal operations, it's completely ignored. But in that scenario where we are completely disconnected from the ES6i controller cluster because it's offline, then the global VTEP list kicks in. When a host recognizes that it cannot contact the control cluster, then when we have BUM traffic, broadcast, unknown unicast, or multicast, the host will forward the frame to every member of the global VTEP list. So if we revisit our earlier scenario where virtual machine D needed to communicate with virtual machine B, but now we have CDO enabled, what's going to happen? When virtual machine D needs to try and track down virtual machine B, and so we're dealing with an unknown unicast, it'll send that outbound ping to every single member of the global VTEP list, ensuring that if virtual machine B is out there, hosted anywhere, it can receive the intended frame. Is that a little bit inefficient? Yeah, it is. But it gets the job done during the interim while the NSX control cluster is offline. This feature is not enabled by default. I would highly recommend enabling it, especially if you have wide area networks where your hosts could be separated from your NSX controllers. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.